So the other day I was at Tony's Delicatessen, and that was a place that my mom just really loved. And I was buying stuff, my cheese and some roast beef, and I looked over in the little cabinet, and there was rice pudding. And I just remembered very fondly all the times that Verla stopped and got mom, Nana, rice pudding. And how much she enjoyed that. And so, in this whole journey, there's been ups and downs of caregiving and grief. And it's nice to have some times to pause and to remember fondly people that were important to her life. And we're really excited today to have one of those people with us, Virla Ocker, who is the admissions director at Nippenose Valley Village. And she has a world of experience that we hope will be able to be shared with our listeners today. But we also wanted her on here because she ended up being very special to my mom. So welcome, Virla.
Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to share a little bit of your background. You've worked at Nippenose Valley Village for 10 years?
It will be 10 years this year that I've officially been there, which has been probably 10 of the most fun years of my life. First of all, I've enjoyed working with you and the owners. I love my job and what I do, and I love the friendships and relationships that I have made while I've been there. One of those, of course, being your mother. And I wanted to tell you, when you said about the rice pudding, you forgot about the pumpkin frosted cookies.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, they were her
agree.
favorite. I could not walk out of there without getting some of those for her and for myself.
Yeah. Court, you remember it wasn't too long before she passed that she had you buy, like, I don't know, what was it, 2 pounds of hot dogs or
5
something?
pounds of hot dogs. I took her to the doctor, and she always had a list of things that
She
she
did.
needed, and so often, like, we would have to have her call in her order to Tony's and just pick it up. And I was like, I'll take you, like, right to, you can pick out whatever you want at Tony's. And we walk in, and the first thing she says is, I need 5 pounds of hot dogs. And I was like, what are you going to do with 5 pounds of hot dogs? And she's like, well, I'm going to eat them. And I was like, well, seems like it's going to work out, I guess. I don't know, like, wrap them up. I don't know.
Yeah, all 80-year-old women living at a personal care home need 5 pounds of hot dogs. I can attest to the fact that she used to make herself a hot dog every once in a while.
Yeah.
That's
She really
good.
liked it. So for all of our listeners, welcome back. This is the Hey Woman podcast, and it is a podcast that's dedicated to my mom, who you just heard Court's story. All the grandkids used to say, "Hey woman, how are you?" And the purpose of this podcast is to, be a telephone call or a lifeline to people who are in the middle of caregiving or grieving, just to kind of talk about the ups and downs. And one of the reasons we really wanted Virla on here today was to talk about, this kind of transition to a facility, a personal care home, assisted living, and how do we tour and what do we need to know. And I'd just like to point out that I think, like, this is something that no matter what situation you're in with caregiving, or in your own aging process, I think people need to think about. We hear time and time again how much social connectedness is important. And people who stay living alone and are socially isolated, it's just not good. And I certainly know Mom benefited from that social interaction. And she herself was not necessarily somebody who really liked being overly social, all the time, but she definitely benefited from it. So Virla, let's talk about, somebody's listening and they're wondering, should they or should their loved one consider going into some sort of facility living? And just so everybody knows, we're not talking about nursing home care. We're talking about some sort of senior living, which could have a medical component too, but has a social component, some sort of communal living. What would you tell them? Where do they start?
First, they need to come and do a tour. That's the first step. Often loved ones don't want to admit that they need that, and it's a struggle for the family members to get them to come. So I try very, very much to make sure that they realize they're just looking. This is giving them an opportunity to see if it's something that they might enjoy. Of course, we always like to point out the social highlights that we do, the great meals. Elderly people look forward to their meals. They don't like to cook anymore when they're alone at home. And then more so than anything, I think, is the safety. You know, you need to be safe. So I always express how much safety is a priority for us. And knowing that we have 24-hour care, we check on our residents. We have an emergency system that if they needed our help, we could get it. And the timeliness of if they did need that, where being alone, it could be a long time. But when you come to a community like ours, it's a matter of minutes.
Yeah, and I think that was a big issue with Mom. She was at home and she had dropped foot, and she would fall every once in a while. And sometimes I would call her at night, and if she didn't answer, now I was only 3 minutes away from her, but I'd drive to her house. There she'd be sitting. I'd be like, Mom, what are you doing? She's like, well, she didn't feel like answering the phone, but I didn't know if she had fallen,
Sure.
and, how long would she, be without somebody? And so I hear the safety.
I also think, Verla brings up a good point, and it's a big decision. And sometimes it takes a little bit for the families to kind of get on board with what's happening. And so touring is a great way to start getting information early before there's a crisis.
Absolutely.
Because then when you have a crisis, you have the information and you know what the plan is. And we've talked about that on other episodes. And so I think it's important to highlight of, this is just information gathering. It doesn't mean you're moving tomorrow, but it's important to have a plan.
Exactly. And that is one thing I express to them. It's a big decision. It's a big decision to leave your home and maybe where you've raised your family and lived most of your life. And think about it. I'm not a pressure person. I don't like being pressured anywhere. And I don't believe in pressuring people. And we have a nice program. It's a respite program. So I encourage them, once they've thought about it, if they think they'd like to try it and see if it's for them, try out a couple weeks respite. See if this type of lifestyle, would work for you. And if you do think that you could adapt to this. So that I think is very important, is not to pressure someone, let them think about it. And also, I really do try to encourage respite stays. We have some entertainment or an activity that I think they would enjoy. I invite them to come and join us and, just sit in on it. Come and have lunch with us. Try a meal. See how you feel about the way our dining service is operated. So biggest thing is I don't pressure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great for families to expect that that their loved one shouldn't be pressured.
It's a life decision.
It is. And it is like you're leaving your home. And I know I'd worked with one family recently and they kept saying, Mom has to sell the house. And I kept saying, stop saying that. Like, why don't you try it out? Like, do a
Right.
respite. And if then she is okay with it, you can sell the house 6 months later. Like, you don't, sometimes people like make it like it's not a test drive, but it can be.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you would know better than I do, but I would bet many people who do respites end up staying or coming, in the years forward.
I can honestly sit here and say that I would say 99% of them. At Nippenose Valley Village, I only recall 2 people who did not come back permanent that came for respites, but they were there after a nursing home visit, weren't ready to go home yet, needed a little extra care, and came and stayed with us for a few months. And the one lady comes back now and plays bingo every week with the residents.
That's
So
wonderful.
yeah,
That's
it's a nice testimony that she enjoyed it, and I feel confident that if she ever were to need permanent placement, we would be the people she would come to see.
Yeah. And I think, again, this idea of, you're just going and touring it. So I don't want to get over the idea of like, looking at brochures, looking online, just talking about it. I think just taking that step and getting inside the facility so that, people, they think about the nursing homes of the, 1980s and 90s.
They
and
do.
that's not what we're talking about.
No, and I was just going to say to you, most people have the idea that they're coming to a nursing home. And once they come and they see their apartments and they see the beautiful lounges and the independence that they can have, they can come and go as they would in their own home, it makes it a lot easier, much
Yeah.
easier.
I think a lot of people are probably surprised that there's some people who still have their cars.
There are. Maybe shouldn't, but there are.
Any other thoughts, like when you're taking a family on a tour, any other things that are important to you for people to consider or you think that they should consider?
Well, first of all, again, back to safety. I always say safety. Even if you have a first alert button, maybe you had a fall and you were unconscious and you could not push that button. That is one thing. We do our room checks every 2 hours, so you'll at least be checked on every 2 hours and maybe not laying there for 24 hours or longer, which has happened. I also think that our location is beautiful, so they have to look at safety in that aspect. Sadly, in today's world, elderly people living alone become victims of many things,
It's unfortunate.
even with caregivers, and it is very unfortunate. So we're in a rural area. It's a beautiful area, but it's a safe area. And because we are staffed, I like to point that out to them. They always say, "Do you lock your doors?" And what hour do you lock the doors? That's a big question with people, believe it or not. They're concerned about that. Another thing, I do encourage people sometimes to look at other communities.
They should.
We really may not be a fit for them. And if we're not, they're not going to be happy. And we want our residents to be happy. And I will also say that I could say 90% of the time when they do go and look at other communities, they'll come back and they'll say, "It's so home-like here. It's so warm." And so those are important things. Looking around, do your homework, make sure it's the right fit.
And if you're listening and you go to someplace and it doesn't feel like the right fit, I think you trust your instincts about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. What else do you think that, families, like let's say that they're caring for somebody and that person just won't have this conversation. Do you think it's okay for them to come by themselves and look more into it?
I do. I really do. Or sometimes if somebody doesn't want to, if I can go visit them and I can talk to them, I can share what services we offer. And oftentimes that does create the respite stay. And we keep telling them, it's not like you're being put in a nursing home. You're going to an independent apartment for yourself.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about things like cutting the grass, plowing the snow, who's going to get me for groceries.
I know, Virla, when you talk about stuff like that, like I want to move in.
I do. That's true. Yeah, it's very true.
Virla and I will have rooms beside each other.
Absolutely.
Bring me my meal.
Do you think, Virla, like, who should come on the tour? So do you have lots of where they bring all the families? Is it more like the decision makers? Like, are they big groups that tour? Like, for the family, who should they bring with them?
I think, first of all, the power of attorney. And if the loved one who they're looking for can come, that's the important one. I have had tours where I've had 8 and 10 people, and that's very challenging. Everyone has their own opinion, their own idea. Some may not agree. Others are 100% on board. And that gets their loved one confused. They have mixed emotions, which daughter should I make happy? So I think it's very important for the person who's coming there, if they're willing, to come and tour first, maybe by themselves or with their power of attorney, whether it be a daughter or a friend, whomever.
I think that's a good point because, it's funny. We're sitting here talking about it and it makes me think about when we toured colleges. It's kind of a very similar concept. It's like your late in life college tour, right?
Absolutely.
And it's funny. I just took my brother DJ. So he's going to be starting law school here in Harrisburg. And I just took him to visit his apartments. And we had very similar conversations. I was like, we have to eat lunch nearby and see if there's a good spot. We have to check out the grocery stores, and you have to kind of feel the vibe of like, he looked like online to see all these apartments. And it's funny, we toured one and it smelled horrendously.
I'm sure.
And you can't see that online.
No.
But then we toured another one and it was just so nice and it was so well upkept. And, everybody, they take really nice professional pictures, but it's nice to see, on a random Tuesday in April, what does it really look like? Are there residents walking around? Are there people that are happy? So, it's funny. We do this for other facets of our lives. It makes sense to do it for this.
And it totally is like that. It's like going back to where you started.
Yeah.
It truly is.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, because I was on the opposite. I didn't go on those tours with DJ, but I was looking online with him, and what we would find online versus what he actually liked ended up being not exactly the same thing. And so I think that's important. I also, just want everybody to hear Virla's first point of like, just go on that tour. You don't have to know, because what's going to happen at some point in time is your loved one could decline. There could be a crisis. And then all of a sudden you're standing at the hospital and they're giving you, 3 names and you don't even know what that is. Like, I suggest you go look at a nursing home, look at a personal care or assisted living, start to understand the differences in those care models and what they can provide. Because remember, that person that's at the hospital who's, working on that discharge, they have requirements that have nothing to do with what's in your best interest. They have requirements of getting people discharged. They have, maybe there should be a different level of care. I also just want to underline the hospice that Virla talked about. I'm not hospice. I'm sorry. The respite stay that you talked about. The respite is so, so important. That is how Mom ended up starting out. She was still home, independent, driving. She had a surgery, a little bit of a setback, wasn't feeling good. And I was going out of town. And I said to her, Mom, like, I don't know what to do, but like, you can't be alone. So you just need to go in there for a week, and I came home from that and she was like, take me home, and then I had to do it was like, a month later. And by the time I came home that time, I was like, Mom, I'm home. I'll pick you up from the facility, the community, and take you home. And she's like, oh, just, I'm talking to Virla. You can get me after dinner, and it was that, that second time that really did it for her. And so I think that's both helpful for that person to test drive it. It's also helpful, if you're a caregiver and you haven't had a vacation in a very long time. It's okay. It's okay to use respite care. Your loved one will make it through,
And I encourage that. I have seen through the years that I've been doing this where caregivers get burnout and their health declines. And usually their loved one is doing well and they're having all kinds of situations and problems, and it's not good. They need to take care of themselves. They need to not get resentment towards what they're doing, but have a good relationship and a loving relationship with their loved one, rather than being resentful because I'm tied down. I can't do this. I can't do that. I have to cook for Mom. I have to do that for Mom, And sometimes they're at the point in their life where they're ready for retirement and they want to enjoy retirement, but yet they have this commitment to their loved one and they can't do that.
Yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of people listening that they're exactly in that, and I think it's okay to still love your loved one, but that doesn't mean you have to cook every meal for them. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't take a vacation, because many of the people that are caregiving, like you said, are retirement age themselves. They've maybe raised their own children. Like, this is time that, well, before they get sick, they ought to go and do some things, and whatever that is, whether it's taking care of their own grandchild, whether it's, just taking the day off and going to an amusement park with their grandchild, or taking a vacation, someplace else. I think all of that's important.
Yeah, they have to take care of themselves.
Yeah,
Let us take care of your loved one and you take care of yourself.
absolutely.
So Virla, if somebody was coming like on a tour, what questions do you recommend that they ask? So I think, in this episode, we've given them some really good ideas about like, can they try out an activity? Can they try out a meal? But what
Mhm.
are like good questions that people ask, or what should people be thinking about?
Well, you can always tell people who have surfed the internet to get the questions that you should ask. What's your staffing? How do you administer medication? What are the meals like? Those type of things. I think the first thing that's really important that not everybody's finances are the same. Some people have limited income. My first question that I always ask is, was your husband or are you a veteran from the military? And if so, let me talk to you about some options of aid and attendance benefits that you could possibly benefit from, because they worry about the cost. So I always like to give them that option. And then the same as with like, not every room is right for everybody. It might be a room that's too big, and it might be just too much space for their loved one, depending on what their condition is. So we talk about what's the best room for them. Diets. Are they on a special diet? So that we can work with them to reassure them that we'll help them with that. If the problem is they're forgetting medications, they're not sure if they took the pill, then they take it, or they don't take it and they miss a dose, and then that's another problem. We like to reassure them and let them know that they don't have to worry about their medication. We'll take care of that for them. Not everyone is in that situation, but most people welcome that. They don't want to have to worry about taking their medications. I talk to them, of course, about how it's not like you're in prison. It's not like you can't leave the building. You can go and come as you please. You can go overnight stays. You can travel. All of those things. So those are some really important things. I think the biggest thing is just to know that we're there if you need us. We want to give you peace of mind, so you don't have to worry about your loved one. You can sleep at night, or you can go away and not worry about them. And that's one of the biggest things, really, that we try and make them aware of.
Yeah, and one of the things I think too that people, is just kind of happening out there, some it's not good, not bad. I would just want to know some venture capitalists are, buying up different facilities. I'd want to know a little bit about the management. Is it a nonprofit? Is it for profit? But even more than that, what is it for profit? And it's owned more kind of locally by individuals. Like, for instance, Nippenose Valley Village is owned by people who are in the community, who are, want it for that community. Or is it, a more corporate structure where maybe some of the most important things are profits? And so it's funny, yesterday, Dr. Nesbitt did a presentation with me, and he talked about that happening too with hospices. Like, that before you didn't really have to worry about that. But just kind of, I would want to know, like, who owns it, and what's those expectations? What's happening?
And that is one point, Julie. That is a very good point. I always make people aware we are privately owned by local people who have a truly vested interest in the residents. They're available at us. We don't have to go through a corporate chain of command, so to speak, for anything that the residents may want or need.
Yeah, and I think that matters at the end of the day. The fact that I'm going to see somebody at church if if their loved one's not getting the care that they want. I'm going to hear about it
Absolutely.
personally, and so I do think that makes it
It does.
different. Yeah.
I also think, Virla, you do so many tours, but you're also around the facility. And I think it's nice because people have made such personal decisions, and they toured with you, and then they get to see you, and it's a familiar face. And I know that was always, Nan didn't tour. She did the respite visit, and then she came, but she always enjoyed seeing you around the village, and then you become, a part, or maybe their first friend that they have.
Well, I say we become your extended family.
Yeah.
That's how I like to look at it. And they are special to me. They do become my extended family. And I enjoy, as I say, taking a time out and going to visit with them and get to know them and about their past and it's interesting. It's very interesting to learn what people did, what their background was, what their interests are. Very interesting.
Yeah, there's been some amazing residents at the village over the years. They just did wonderful things. I always think about like getting to know them is such a privilege.
It is a privilege. It truly is.
So, what's one of your favorite memories of my mom, or story, or?
I love to hear your mother tell me about her grandchildren, of course.
Oh, yes.
And let me think. There are so many. I enjoyed the fact I got her to play the piano.
Oh, yes. that's
She
right.
loved playing the piano. I enjoyed the fact that we had people learn to do the wee bowling that you
yes.
brought over. It's just seeing them happy and develop new friendships, I think is one of the greatest things. I know, sadly, the same year that your mother passed, we lost 2 other residents, and the 3 of them were very close
I know. I was thinking.
as friends, and I was very close to each one of them. And that was a tough year for me. That was really difficult. So I have to make sure that I keep my emotions in the right line so that I don't get too emotionally involved, because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard when you lose people that you've had live with you for 5-6 years at the community.
Yeah, Mom had lived there 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I think that's important. Well, for our listeners, I really think it's important that you don't just say, put your head in the sand and say, I'm caring for my loved one at home. Because that might happen. It may not happen. It may not be able to happen simply because you yourself get sick. You don't always have control over these things. And I think that there's managing in-home care. So many other people, maybe they're not providing the care, but they're managing other caregivers in-home. That is really hard. What if that caregiver calls off? Who's gonna fill that void? So I know in my law practice, a lot of people come to us and they are just like, we're going to keep our loved one at home. And I'm not saying that that's not an okay choice. I just think it's worth exploring what would a community look like. Because I think at the end of the day, sometimes your loved one might be able to really be part of a community rather than just being cared for by strangers in their home. And I think it's a better outcome. It was one of the things that shocked me about my mom at Nippenose Valley Village. There was a time in there where when she got sick, but she wasn't, at her dying time, she was still okay, where she really became, that was her community. And it was really wonderful for her because it got her dependence off of me. Which was upsetting to her. She didn't like to be like dependent. And so, I can remember one time, like I went over and said, "Hey mom, I'm going to bring you over like Sunday for dinner." And she's like, "I have other plans." Like, right.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
That's a comfort to you.
It is. I was like, "What do you mean you have other plans?" But she got to the point where like she had her own life. I remember Court one time you came home from Boston and she was like going to go do an activity. And you're like,
Yeah, no, I went over in the middle of the day and she's like, "Well, I'm late for bingo." She's like, "You can come
I'm
back."
sure.
She's like, "You can come back later." And I was like, "All right, like
I just came from Boston, but good,
right? Like I drove 400 miles and you would have like yelled at me if I hadn't come right here,
But what a comfort. What a
Yes.
comfort and reassurance to you to know that she has settled in. She's adjusted to her new lifestyle and she's made new friends. Not that you aren't important, because you certainly were, but I mean, that's a good feeling.
It was. Once I got over the shock of her going to bingo, you were
the bingo is more important than you.
Yeah.
Bingo is always more important.
It makes you feel good. And, she would talk about watching baseball games with like other residents. And, she always talked about you, Virla.
Oh, well, I hope it was good.
Always.
Oh, yeah. And Mel,
She loved Mel.
Yeah, she made many friends there. Yeah.
And I think, some of them are residents, but some of them were staff. And I think that's a really important thing with any facility. That's why it's, going back to why it's so important to tour, because you get to meet the staff.
You do.
And the staff, especially if they've, the village has been lucky to have some really long-standing staff that are really fantastic.
We do.
And they do such wonderful things for the residents.
Yeah. Well, if there's something that isn't Virla approved, I do let them know about it in a nice way. But I feel I'm telling them something.
Yeah.
If I'm selling them a community, their home for life, I want to be true to my word. I don't want them coming to me and say, you said or you told me. And I can't say that happens often. But,
but when it does, no place
you
is
have
perfect.
to address it.
Yeah, you definitely are an advocate for the residents themselves.
I
to
truly
say,
am.
hey, like this is not what I told these people, so we have to honor our commitments to them.
Exactly.
And I know the owners are very much, very much in support of that.
And I appreciate that. And the one really nice thing is we pride ourselves that residents don't leave us and go to a nursing home. That's their home. If they get to the point where they are at end of life stage, we like to have palliative and hospice care. We want them to be in their home and to get the care they deserve and they need and to be comfortable. And that's a challenge sometimes, but that's one thing I really do advocate for.
And I think that's a great question for people to ask on visits. Do you accept hospice in here? Can my loved one age in place? Because we always talk about aging at home, but really I think we have to change our languaging to aging in place. Like for Mom, she moved to the village and then she stayed there 8 years, but then she was able to age in place. And when she passed away there, that was her home.
It was.
She wasn't in a nursing home. She wasn't at the hospital. She was able to age in place. And that was really the gift, if there was.
And that's important. It's hard for people to be taken from one environment to another one and adjust and adapt to new people and surroundings. So I really, I do my best to make sure that if that's a situation, everybody has that opportunity.
Well, Virla, I appreciate everything you ever did for my mom.
Well, thank you. I loved every minute of it. And I miss her. I miss her dearly. For the longest time, I'd just go back in her room because I could smell the...
That's funny.
It
Downy.
was Carol. Maybe it was the Downy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. I packed away a lot of her clothes, and I would just open them up and smell them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, Virla, we thank you for joining us to
Well, thank you for having me.
one, talk about Nan, which is always great, but two, just to shed some light. I think visiting can feel like such a scary first step.
It is.
And so it's always nice to give our listeners something concrete that they can listen to before, give them some advice. And so if this is the first time you're listening to us, we encourage that you follow us along on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. If you're not in the Pennsylvania area and you're looking for an attorney that can help kind of navigate this, that also can be a great first step. They lots of times can give you a list of facilities and different things like that. So the planningandprotecting.com site is a really great resource for that. And so, we thank everybody for listening, and we thank you, Virla, for sharing.
Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed it.